I remember the night I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the quiet glow of the city outside my window. The hum of cars on the street below should have felt comforting, but instead it reminded me of how heavy my heart still was. I had promised myself I was done with complicated love. Done with giving away my heart too quickly. Done with waking up in someone's bed only to feel empty inside. After my last breakup, I made a vow to myself, a list of strict rules. No late-night texts. No crossing lines. No letting anyone get too close. I told myself boundaries would save me. They would protect me from getting hurt again. And for a while, they did. My life became quiet, controlled, predictable. But then she walked into it. She wasn't the kind of woman you could easily ignore. There was something about her presence that stirred the air in a room, something magnetic in the way she carried herself. The first time I saw her, she was laughing with friends, her head tilted back, her voice cutting through the noise like music. I remember my chest tightening as though my body recognized her before my mind did. And when our eyes met, just for a second, I felt it, a spark that was both exciting and dangerous. I looked away quickly, reminding myself, boundaries. I had built walls around my heart, and I wasn't going to let anyone break them, but life has a way of testing the promises we make to ourselves. We were introduced through mutual friends not long after, and when she extended her hand, I hesitated before taking it. Her skin was warm, her grip firm, and she looked straight into my eyes with a confidence that unsettled me. She didn't look at me like I was another stranger. She looked at me like she already knew me. That scared me more than I wanted to admit. I forced myself to smile politely, keeping the conversation safe, neutral, casual. But she had a way of asking questions that felt too honest, too raw. She asked about my work, my hobbies, what made me laugh, what broke my heart. And before I realized it, I was giving away pieces of myself I had sworn to keep hidden. Later that night, as I replayed our conversation in my mind, I felt restless. I shouldn't have opened up so easily. I knew better. My rules were simple: don't get attached, don't let anyone close enough to break you again. But why did it feel so good talking to her? Why did her voice linger in my mind like a song I couldn't turn off? I pulled the blanket over my head, frustrated at myself for feeling like a teenager again. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not to me. Not now. The next time I saw her, I tried to act distant. I kept my arms crossed, my answers short, but she didn't seem bothered. In fact, she leaned in closer, teasing me, making jokes, brushing her hand lightly against mine as if to test how far she could go. Every small touch sent heat rushing to my skin, and every laugh from her lips pulled me closer to the edge of breaking my own rules. I told myself she was dangerous, that she was the kind of woman who could unravel me if I wasn't careful. But instead of running, I stayed. And that scared me even more. That night when I got home, I couldn't sleep. I sat in bed staring at my phone, her name glowing on the screen from a simple message, *I had fun tonight. You're different. In a good way. *I should have ignored it. I should have put the phone down and buried myself in the safety of my boundaries. But my fingers betrayed me, typing back before my brain could stop them. *I had fun too. And just like that, a door cracked open in the wall I had built, and light began to seep in. I lay awake long after our conversation ended, staring at the ceiling with a storm inside my chest. I thought about the way she looked at me, the way her laughter made my body ache with a hunger I hadn't felt in so long. And I thought about my promise, the one I made after my last heartbreak, the one that was supposed to protect me. But deep down I knew the truth. I wasn't afraid of her. I was afraid of myself, afraid of how much I already wanted her. Afraid of how quickly my boundaries were beginning to blur. The days that followed were filled with a strange kind of anticipation I couldn't admit to anyone, not even myself. I tried to keep things casual, to remind myself that we were just acquaintances circling around the same group of friends, but every time my phone buzzed with her name, my pulse quickened. At first, her messages were harmless, just little jokes about something we both noticed, small talk about the day. But then they started coming late at night, when the world was quiet and I was most vulnerable. She would ask things like, *, what are you thinking about right now? *, do you ever feel like you're pretending to be stronger than you are? *, they weren't ordinary questions, not the kind you brushed off with a short answer. They were the kind of questions that made me stop, stare at the screen, and feel like she could already see the cracks inside me. We started spending more time together outside of the group. At first, it was simple, a coffee here, a walk there, casual excuses to see each other. But each meeting stretched longer than I planned, every conversation pulling me deeper in. She was good at making the world fall away when she spoke, like the only thing that mattered was the moment we were sharing. She had this habit of leaning in just slightly when I talked, as if every word I said mattered. That kind of attention was dangerous. It felt too good. It made me want to trust her, to give her pieces of myself I had promised to keep hidden behind my boundaries. I told myself to keep distance, but she didn't make that easy. She'd brush her fingers against mine when she laughed, hold eye contact just a little longer than necessary, and her smile always carried a hint of something daring. It was like she knew exactly where my walls were and enjoyed pressing against them, not with force, but with gentle persistence. Each time, my heart raced and my breath grew uneven, yet I still tried to laugh it off, to act unaffected. Deep down, though, I was terrified of how quickly she was dismantling the defenses I had built so carefully. One night we sat together in her car after an evening with friends. Music played softly from the speakers, some slow, haunting song that made the air feel heavy. Neither of us was in a rush to leave, and the silence between us grew charged. She tapped her fingers lightly against the steering wheel before turning to me and asking, "Do you always push people away when they get too close?" The question pierced through me, because it was the very thing I had been struggling with. I wanted to tell her no, to lie, to protect myself, but the truth caught in my throat. Instead, I gave a small, almost broken laugh and said, "It's safer that way." She didn't argue. She just looked at me for a long time, her eyes soft but steady, as though she could see every wound I carried. I had to look away because the weight of her gaze felt like it was stripping me bare. My chest ached with a mix of fear and longing, a battle I couldn't make sense of. That moment hung in the air, fragile and dangerous. I thought she might kiss me, and for one terrifying second, I wanted her to. My body leaned forward before my mind caught up, and when I realized what I was doing, I jerked back, my heart hammering. The look on her face wasn't anger. It was patience, almost sadness, as if she understood the war raging inside me. She didn't push, didn't make me feel guilty. Instead, she whispered, "I get it. But you don't always have to be afraid." The words wrapped around me like a secret I wasn't ready to believe. That night, when I was finally alone in my bed, I replayed everything over and over. The way her hand rested so close to mine on the console, the way her eyes searched mine, the way my own heart betrayed me by wanting something I had sworn I would never allow again. I reminded myself of the rules I had set: no late-night talks, no blurred lines, no intimacy. But already I was breaking them. She was slipping past my defenses, one question, one touch, one look at a time. And though I tried to fight it, I couldn't deny the truth. I wanted her more than I wanted my safety, and that was the most dangerous part of all. The tension between us grew heavier with each passing day, like a thread pulled too tight and ready to snap. I tried to bury myself in routines, work, errands, long evenings pretending to read while staring at the same page for hours. But no matter how hard I tried, her presence lingered in my thoughts. Every text from her sent a ripple of excitement and fear through me, and every time we met, I could feel my carefully built walls bending under the pressure. She didn't even need to touch me to make my body respond. Her voice, her smile, the way she looked at me as though I was something rare and fragile, it all worked against my will. One evening she invited me over for coffee. I told myself it was harmless, just coffee, just conversation. But the moment I stepped inside her apartment, I felt the air shift. The room smelled faintly of vanilla and something floral, and there was music playing softly in the background. She handed me a mug, her fingers brushing mine in a way that sent a tremor through my body. I sat on the couch, clutching the mug like a lifeline, trying to calm the storm inside me. She sat close, too close, her knee brushing against mine, her presence overwhelming yet comforting at the same time. The conversation started light, filled with jokes and laughter, but as always, she guided it toward something deeper. She had this way of asking questions that slipped under my skin, questions that made me confront feelings I wanted to bury. At one point, she asked, "Do you ever feel like you're hiding from your own heart?" I froze, staring into my coffee as though the answer was written in the swirls of steam. I didn't know how to respond, because the truth was yes. Every day, yes. I was hiding, protecting myself, terrified of being broken again. But saying that out loud felt too raw, too dangerous. When I didn't answer, she shifted closer, her shoulder brushing mine. The warmth of her body seeped into me, and I felt my resolve weakening. I wanted to lean into her, to feel her arms around me, to surrender. But my fear roared louder. I set the mug down and stood quickly, pacing across the room as though movement could shake off the intensity. I can't do this, I muttered, more to myself than to her. She didn't chase me. She didn't beg. She just sat there, watching me with steady eyes that held no judgment, only patience. You don't have to run from me, she said softly, and her voice almost undid me. I sank back into the couch, burying my face in my hands. I felt torn in two, one part of me desperate to surrender to her, the other clinging to the rules I had made to keep myself safe. She reached out then, gently prying my hands away from my face. Her fingers lingered against my skin, and when I looked up, her eyes were so close, so filled with something I had been starving for, tenderness. For a moment, the world shrank down to the space between us. I could hear her breathing, feel the heat of her body, smell the faint trace of her perfume. And then, almost without realizing, I leaned in, but just before our lips touched, panic surged through me. My chest tightened, and I pulled back so fast it was almost clumsy. My breath came quick and uneven as I shook my head. No. I can't. The words sounded weak even to my own ears, but they were all I had. Her expression didn't harden, she didn't look angry. Instead, she gave a small, sad smile, as if she had expected this. It's okay, she whispered. I'm not going anywhere. That made it worse somehow, because kindness was harder to resist than pressure. I gathered my things and stood, desperate to escape before I completely lost control. She walked me to the door, not touching me, not saying anything more, just watching with those steady eyes that haunted me long after I left. That night, lying in bed, I felt the echo of her touch on my skin, the ghost of her closeness in the silence of my room. I hated how much I wanted her. I hated that every boundary I had set was trembling under the weight of my desire. And most of all, I hated myself for running when all I truly wanted was to stay. I tried to put distance between us after that night. I convinced myself it was the only way to keep control of my life, the only way to keep my promise to myself. I filled my days with long hours at work, errands I didn't really need to run, and empty distractions that never satisfied me. But no matter how busy I made myself, there was always a quiet moment at the end of the day when the silence pressed too heavily, and in that silence, her face appeared. Her laugh echoed in my head, the warmth of her hand replayed in my memory, and the weight of her words haunted me. I'm not going anywhere. It had sounded so simple when she said it, but it left me restless. If she wasn't going anywhere, then what was I running from? I thought ignoring her messages would help. I saw her name light up my phone more than once, and I forced myself to leave it unanswered. Each time I put the phone down, a part of me ached, but I told myself it was necessary. I told myself that if I could just hold firm, eventually she would fade from my life, and the feeling she stirred in me would die out like a fire without oxygen. But the truth was, the more I tried to suppress it, the more it consumed me. Nights felt longer. My apartment felt colder. I caught myself staring at the ceiling, wondering what she was doing, if she missed me, if she thought of me as much as I thought of her. It wasn't long before life forced us into the same space again. A mutual friend hosted a small gathering, and I almost didn't go. But the thought of staying home, alone with my thoughts, seemed unbearable. So I went, telling myself it was harmless. The moment I walked in and saw her, my resolve cracked. She was standing across the room, laughing with someone, her head tilted back, her smile bright. When her eyes found mine, I froze. There was no anger in them, no coldness for the distance I had tried to create. Instead, there was something softer, something that made my heart stumble in my chest. I avoided her at first, keeping conversations light with others, forcing smiles that didn't reach my eyes. But I could feel her presence across the room like a pull I couldn't escape. Eventually, when the crowd thinned and the night grew quieter, she made her way over to me. She didn't start with small talk. She didn't pretend nothing had happened. Instead, she looked me straight in the eyes and asked, "Why are you pushing me away?" Her voice wasn't angry, it was steady, calm, almost pleading. I felt exposed under her gaze, stripped of all the excuses I had rehearsed in my head. I tried to brush it off, to laugh, to say I was busy, that I had too much going on. But the words died in my throat, because she wasn't looking for excuses. She wanted the truth. My chest felt tight, and before I could stop myself, the confession spilled out. Because I'm scared. My voice cracked on the word, and the air between us shifted. I admitted it all, the heartbreak that had left me guarded, the promises I made to myself, the boundaries that had become walls too high for anyone to climb. I told her I wanted her, that every part of me ached for her, but I was terrified of losing myself, terrified of opening the door to pain again. She didn't interrupt. She just listened, her eyes never leaving mine, her hand inching closer until it finally rested gently on mine. That simple touch undid me. Tears welled in my eyes before I could stop them, hot and uninvited. She squeezed my hand, her voice low and steady when she said, "I'm not here to hurt you. I just want to know you. All of you. Even the parts you're afraid of." Something in me cracked open then, a place I had sealed shut long ago. The tears slipped free, and before I knew it, I was leaning into her, letting her arms wrap around me. It wasn't a kiss, it wasn't passion, it was something softer, something safer. It was the feeling of being held without judgment, without expectation. For the first time in a long time, I let myself lean on someone else, even if just for a moment. We sat like that for what felt like hours, the world around us fading into nothing. There were no promises made, no declarations of love. Just silence, warmth, and the unspoken acknowledgement that something between us had shifted. My heart was still fragile, still afraid, but in her arms, the fear didn't feel so heavy. For the first time, I wondered if maybe letting someone in again didn't have to mean losing myself. When I finally pulled away, her hand stayed in mine, our fingers intertwined. We didn't speak, and we didn't need to. The night had given us something words couldn't capture, the beginning of a trust one thought I would never find again. And even though my walls were still there, for the first time, I felt the possibility that maybe I didn't have to keep them forever. The days that followed felt different, softer, as though the air between us had shifted into something unspoken but undeniable. I still carried my fears, but now there was a thread of hope tangled in them, and that thread pulled me toward her no matter how hard I tried to keep my guard up. We started seeing more of each other, not in big ways, but in small, ordinary moments that somehow felt extraordinary. She would invite me over for dinner, and I would find myself lingering at her kitchen counter, watching her chop vegetables while she talked about her day. There was something calming in the way she moved, something grounding in the way she paid attention to the smallest details. I told myself it was safe, that it was just companionship, but deep down I knew it was more than that. One evening, she insisted we cook together. I tried to protest, joking that I could barely boil water without burning it, but she just laughed and handed me a knife. We stood side by side at the counter, chopping and stirring, brushing past each other in the cramped space. Every touch, even accidental, sent sparks through me. I felt myself smiling more easily, laughing more freely, and with each laugh, I could feel my walls lowering without permission. When we sat down to eat, the conversation stretched on long after the food grew cold. We shared stories about our childhoods, our dreams, and the things we never admitted to anyone else. Her openness disarmed me. She didn't flinch at my hesitations, didn't press when I struggled to find the right words. She simply listened, her gaze steady, making me feel like I mattered in a way I hadn't in years. But the more comfortable I became, the more terrified I grew. I had set rules for myself, no sleepovers, no drinking together, no crossing lines that would blur friendship into something more. Those rules had been my safety net, the only things keeping me from falling too fast. Yet, night after night, I found myself testing those boundaries. I stayed later than I should, laughed louder than I meant to, let her words sink deeper into me than I intended. I would drive home in the dark, my chest tight with longing, my body restless with the energy of everything left unsaid. The pull between us only grew stronger. One night, she called me just to say she couldn't sleep. Her voice was soft, almost vulnerable, and without thinking, I offered to come over. The second the words left my mouth, I regretted them, but she didn't hesitate. "I'd like that," she said, and I found myself grabbing my keys before I could change my mind. When I arrived, she was curled up on the couch with a blanket, her hair messy, her smile tired but genuine. She looked at me as though she had been waiting all night for me to arrive, and something inside me ached. We sat close under the blanket, our shoulders pressed together, watching some movie neither of us cared about. The silence between us grew heavier with each passing minute, our breaths sinking, our bodies inching closer without either of us acknowledging it. At some point, I realized my head had rested against her shoulder, and when she tilted her head lightly against mine, I didn't move away. The warmth of her body seeped into me, steady and undeniable, and my heart pounded so loudly I was sure she could hear it. When the movie ended, neither of us moved. She turned to me slowly, her eyes searching mine, her hand brushing gently against my cheek. The world seemed to hold its breath. My lips parted, my body leaning forward almost on instinct, and for one suspended heartbeat, I wanted nothing more than to close the space between us. But just as quickly, panic surged through me. I pulled back abruptly, my chest heaving, my voice shaky as I muttered, "I can't. I can't do this." Her hand lingered in the air for a moment before dropping to her lap. She didn't look angry, but there was something in her eyes, something tender, patient, and yet quietly aching. "It's okay," she said softly, her voice steady even though I could feel the weight of disappointment between us. "I'll wait until you're ready." I stayed a little longer, trying to calm the storm inside me, but eventually I left, my heart a tangled mess of longing and fear. Driving home through the empty streets, I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. My whole body was buzzing with the memory of her touch, the way her breath had mingled with mine, the way my body had screamed to surrender while my mind fought to run. When I finally crawled into bed, I buried my face in the pillow, hating myself for being so weak, for wanting her so badly, for running from the very thing I craved, and yet, beneath the guilt and fear, a quiet truth pulsed in my chest. I was losing the battle against my own boundaries. I wanted her, more than I wanted the safety of the walls I had built. And I didn't know how much longer I could keep pretending otherwise. The days after that night felt like walking on a tightrope with no balance. I went through my routines, smiling when I needed to, talking when I had to, but inside I was unraveling. My thoughts circled around her constantly, replaying the way she looked at me, the way her hand hovered near my face, the way I almost let myself fall. I tried to tell myself that pulling away was the right choice, that I was protecting myself, but the truth pressed heavy in my chest. Every time I ran, I wasn't saving myself, I was only deepening the loneliness that had been swallowing me for years. I kept writing in my journal, desperate to make sense of it. Page after page filled with messy handwriting, half-thoughts, questions I couldn't answer. I told myself I needed boundaries to stay safe, but each word I scribbled felt more like chains than freedom. The rules that once gave me comfort now felt suffocating, like a cage I had locked myself in and lost the key. When I saw her again, she noticed immediately. She always noticed. We were sitting at a small cafe, sunlight spilling through the window, but instead of enjoying it, I was caught in my storm of thoughts. She reached across the table, her fingers brushing mine just enough to draw me back to the present. "You've been somewhere else," she said gently, not accusing, just observing. I tried to smile, to dismiss it, but her gaze pinned me down. "Are you protecting yourself?" she asked softly, "or are you punishing yourself?" The words hit me harder than I wanted to admit. I stared at her, my throat tightening, because she had said out loud the very thing I had been afraid to put into words. Protecting myself had been the excuse, but somewhere along the way, I had turned it into punishment. I had turned love into something forbidden, intimacy into something dangerous, connection into something I wasn't allowed to have. I wanted to answer her, to explain, but the words tangled in my chest. All I managed was a shaky, "I don't know anymore." The silence that followed was heavy, filled with things neither of us knew how to say. She leaned back in her chair, her eyes soft but troubled, and for the first time I saw the weight of patience on her. She had been waiting for me to open up, waiting for me to trust her, and though she never said it, I knew it wasn't easy for her. She wanted me, but she couldn't keep standing at the edge of my walls forever. Later that week, everything broke open. It happened during one of those long nights when I couldn't stop overthinking, when loneliness pressed too hard against my ribs. I went to her place, unannounced, my heart pounding with every step. When she opened the door, surprise flickered across her face, quickly followed by concern. I must have looked a mess, tired eyes, restless energy, words bubbling under the surface. She let me in without question, and we sat on the couch, the silence stretching too far. Finally, I blurted it out, all of it, the fear, the confusion, the way I wanted her but couldn't let myself have her, the way I hated myself for running. My voice cracked as I said, "I don't know how to let you in without losing myself." Her jaw tightened, and for the first time, frustration flickered in her eyes. She stood and paced, running a hand through her hair. "Do you hear yourself?" she said, her voice shaking not with anger, but with hurt. "You're not losing yourself by letting someone love you. You're losing yourself by locking yourself away. You think you're safe in those walls, but all you're doing is building a prison." Her words cut through me, and I felt tears sting my eyes. I wanted to argue, to defend myself, but deep down I knew she was right. My chest burned with the truth of it. I tried to speak, but all that came out was a broken, "I'm scared." My voice cracked on the word, and I hated how small I sounded. She sat back down, her anger dissolving into something softer, but her voice was still firm. "I know you're scared. I know you've been hurt. But you're punishing yourself for it instead of healing. And I can't fight your walls forever. You have to decide if you're going to keep running or if you're finally going to let yourself live." The weight of her words sank into me, heavy and undeniable. Tears slipped down my cheeks, and she reached out, wiping them gently with her thumb. "I want you," she whispered, her voice trembling now too. "But I need you to want yourself enough to stop hiding." We sat there in silence, both of us raw, both of us aching. I leaned into her touch, even as fear clawed at my chest. I wanted to surrender, to believe her, to believe in love again. But the battle inside me was far from over. All I knew in that moment was that she saw me, the parts one tried to bury, the fears I tried to outrun, and she hadn't walked away yet. And that terrified me more than anything, because it meant I no longer had the excuse of being unwanted. That night, I left her apartment with my heart in pieces, torn between the comfort of my walls and the possibility of what waited beyond them. I drove home with her words echoing in my head, haunting me. "Are you protecting yourself, or are you punishing yourself?" For the first time, I didn't have an answer, and the uncertainty was almost worse than the fear itself. The silence between us stretched for days after that night, and it weighed heavier than any argument could have. I went through the motions of my life, showing up to work, answering questions with forced smiles, pretending I was fine, but the truth was I wasn't fine at all. Every morning I woke up with her words echoing in my chest, and every night I fell asleep replaying the look in her eyes when she told me she couldn't fight my walls forever. The absence of her voice, her laughter, her warmth, it hollowed me out. I had thought distance would protect me, but all it did was make me realize how much I was already hers, even if I hadn't admitted it. By the third night, the ache inside me grew unbearable. I found myself standing outside her door without even remembering how I got there, my heart racing, my palms sweating, fear and longing tangled so tightly together it was hard to breathe. For a moment, I almost turned back, almost let fear win again, but then I knocked, my knuckles trembling against the wood. She opened the door slowly, surprise flickering across her face when she saw me. Her eyes softened, but there was caution there too, the kind that said she wasn't sure if she could survive another false start. I swallowed hard, my throat tight, and whispered, "I don't want to be afraid anymore." The words tumbled out, shaky but real, and I watched as her expression shifted, the guard in her eyes melting into something warmer. She stepped aside without a word, letting me in, and I moved past her, my body trembling with the weight of what I was about to confess. We sat on the couch, the same place where I had once pulled away, where I had once chosen fear over desire. The silence was unbearable, and I knew I had to break it. My voice shook as I told her everything, every truth I had been running from. I admitted how much I wanted her, how every time I left her I felt like I was leaving a part of myself behind. I told her about the walls I had built, how they had once made me feel safe but now only suffocated me. And then, with tears slipping down my cheeks, I whispered the words that had been clawing their way out of me for weeks. "I want you. I want you, even if it scares me. I don't want to run anymore." Her eyes filled with emotion as she reached for me, her hands cupping my face as though I was something fragile she had been waiting to hold. "Do you mean that?" she asked, her voice trembling. I nodded, unable to speak, and in that moment, the dam inside me broke. I leaned into her, closing the distance between us, and when our lips finally met, it felt like breathing for the first time after holding my breath for years. The kiss was slow at first, gentle, filled with all the hesitation and longing that had built between us. But then it deepened, urgent and hungry, as though we were both trying to make up for all the times we had stopped ourselves. My hands trembled as they moved to her waist, and hers slid into my hair, pulling me closer. Every fear, every wall, every doubt dissolved in the fire of that moment. It wasn't just desire, it was release, surrender, the breaking open of something I had been holding shut for too long. We moved together as though we had been waiting for this forever. Her touch was tender but sure, guiding me, reassuring me, unraveling me with every caress. I felt myself letting go piece by piece, surrendering not just my body but my heart, giving her the parts of me I had been too afraid to share. There were no words, only breaths, whispers, and the sound of our hearts pounding in rhythm. The world outside ceased to exist. It was just us, tangled in each other, finally free from the weight of what had kept us apart. When it was over, I lay in her arms, my body trembling with the intensity of everything I had just allowed myself to feel. The room was quiet except for our breathing, and for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. I traced small circles on her skin with my fingers, afraid to move, afraid to break the spell of the moment. She pressed a soft kiss against my forehead and whispered, "You're safe here." The words sank deep into me, filling the empty spaces I had carried for so long. As sleep began to tug at me, I realized something profound. I had broken every boundary I had set for myself, every rule I had believed would keep me safe. And yet, instead of feeling shattered, I felt whole. I woke up hours later in her bed, the sheets tangled around us, our bodies still entwined. I was naked, vulnerable in every sense of the word, but for the first time, vulnerability didn't feel like weakness. It felt like freedom. I looked at her sleeping beside me, her face soft and unguarded, and whispered into the quiet, "Maybe love is worth the risk after all." The morning light spilled gently across the room, and I opened my eyes slowly, almost afraid to move, as if shifting would break the fragile magic holding everything together. For a moment I didn't know where I was, my mind still clouded with sleep, but then I felt the warmth of her body beside mine and the memory of the night before came rushing back like a flood. My heart clenched with a mix of awe and disbelief. I had crossed every line I had drawn for myself, and yet instead of regret, there was only this calm, this quiet certainty I hadn't felt in years. I turned my head and saw her lying there, still asleep, her hair messy, her face soft and peaceful, and something in me cracked open even further. She wasn't just someone I wanted, she was someone I trusted, someone I could finally let myself lean on. I lay there for a long time just watching her breathe, listening to the steady rhythm of her chest rising and falling, my hand resting lightly on the sheets as though afraid to touch her, afraid she might vanish if I reached out. I thought about all the nights I had cried myself to sleep, convinced I would never feel this kind of closeness again, convinced that love wasn't meant for me. And here I was, tangled in sheets that still held the heat of our bodies, lying next to someone who had seen my fears, my walls, my mess, and still chosen to stay. When she stirred awake, her eyes blinking open slowly, I felt a rush of nervousness wash over me, like I was a teenager caught in something I wasn't supposed to be doing. But then she smiled, the kind of sleepy smile that seemed to light up her whole face, and whispered a soft hey. That one word melted the last bit of fear I had been holding. I smiled back, shy and trembling, and whispered hey in return, my voice catching on the emotion that was already building in my throat. We stayed there for a while, neither of us rushing to get up, our bodies still wrapped in a cocoon of warmth. She reached for my hand, intertwining our fingers, and said quietly, I wasn't sure if you'd still be here when I woke up. My chest tightened at her honesty, at the vulnerability laced in her words. I squeezed her hand gently and said, I wasn't sure either. But I don't want to run anymore. Saying it out loud felt like planting a flag in new territory, claiming a space I had been too afraid to step into. She leaned closer and pressed her forehead against mine, her voice a whisper when she said, then let's not run anymore. Not from this, not from each other. Her words wrapped around me like an embrace, and I realized in that moment that I wasn't just choosing her, I was choosing myself, choosing to believe that I was worthy of love, worthy of being seen. As the day unfolded, everything felt different. The air seemed lighter, the world outside quieter, as if it was giving us space to simply exist together. We made coffee, laughed softly in the kitchen, touched each other in passing with a new kind of ease that felt both terrifying and exhilarating. Every glance, every brush of her hand against mine carried the weight of all the walls that had come down, and I found myself breathing easier with each moment. But underneath the calm, there was still a current of fear, the kind that whispers questions you don't want to face. What if I wasn't strong enough to keep this? What if I slipped back into old habits, into running and hiding? What if she realized I wasn't as whole as she deserved? These thoughts tugged at me like shadows, but when she caught me drifting, she would touch my arm or kiss my cheek, and it was enough to anchor me back into the present. That night, as we lay in bed again, she pulled me close and whispered, you don't have to have it all figured out. Just promise me one thing. I tilted my head, waiting, my heart thudding in my chest. Promise me you won't keep punishing yourself, she said softly. Promise me you'll let yourself be loved. The tears came before I could stop them, sliding hot and unrestrained down my face. I buried my head against her neck and whispered, I promise. I'll try. For you, and for me. The truth was, I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if fear would creep back in, or if I would stumble again. But lying there in her arms, with her warmth steady against me, I finally believed something I hadn't in a very long time, that maybe love wasn't about being fearless, but about letting someone hold you even when you were afraid. And in that moment, for the first time in years, I wasn't running. I was home.